Hey. Good morning. Any questions?
Yeah, what are we doing?
What are we doing? We're on day one of Black Smoke Rising, which began, you missed it, began with this young man butt naked in the shower, which obviously symbolises the birth of his character and coming forth into the world of scenery.
And how was it for you? I'm just glad because I just didn't actually have a shower this morning, so lovely. Glad you didn't come in here 2 minutes earlier, really, because otherwise you would have. Yes.
I'm going fishing with my Lord, and they say he ain't never coming home. He's going fishing on his own.
The decision to shoot in black and white was a fairly simple one for me. I mean, there's an obvious, aesthetic thing in that it's hard not to like black and white. But that said, that's never an excuse to shoot in black and white just for the sake of it. So for me, what the black and white represents, and why towards the end, when he's sort of reaching some kind of redemption and understanding of his journey, it slides into colour, is that the black and white is an emblem of grief in a sense. Grief is that sort of monochrome. It's all consuming. It is the one thing that governs him, no matter how erratic and unpredictable his behaviour is. It all stems from the same thing. He is governed by that one thing, and it's only towards the end when he starts to sort of see beyond himself and actually sort of reach out to other people and relate to them in their terms rather than his, that his world starts becoming fully colour again.
From day one, Drew told me that Black Smoke Rising was a study of grief, and he wanted to try a new concept of doing a slow, imperceptible, gradual grade from black and white into colour throughout the final act of the movie. He wanted it to be shot in a minimalist lighting style with minimal sources. We had minimal equipment because of budget. Didn't even have a focus puller or a focus wheel. So it was always going to be a very static movie. We didn't have grip equipment. The only lights we had was the lights I own, which wasn't much, and any lighting I could blag. And that turned out to be a really refreshing experience, working on a very small, intimate set with minimal kit, without any politics or nonsense involved that there often is.
So I suppose the obvious main inspiration for Black Smoke Rising was the death of my brother a couple of years ago, which clearly had a very profound effect on me, and I wanted to write a script that would exorcise my own demons in that sense, and b, hopefully provide some kind of inspiration for people who had also lost loved ones unexpectedly or suddenly, or in any event, would just really sort of tackle the monster that is grief.
We roll first time. Let's roll. Speed. Count speed. Scene 32, slate 150. Take one.
It soon became apparent that I might play the role of Jonah. So yeah, it was just a lot of conversations of how it should be played. The kind of character that he was hoping to portray. It's obviously a very personal story for Drew, so I was very privileged to be able to be in that position, to play the role. But that obviously does mean that there's a little bit more pressure on my shoulders to make sure that I don't let him down. I was honoured to do it, but there's a lot of pressure, and hopefully, I've done it justice.
As a musician myself, one of the biggest, most important things to me within the film is the music. I'm always determined that it's absolutely right for what the film is, and this is a no-brainer in a sense that the main character is a musician. He's a blues man, and we have to see the band playing. So of course I called up my friends Hokey Joint to be the music for us to mime along to as the band, because they're a fantastic band, great guys, happy to give us the tracks and music, and I was happy as well that they were very generous with more than just the couple of tracks for us to play along to. There's a couple more tracks because I want this music to have a strong identity within the film. So they provide, I think it's 4 songs that represent Jonah and Rafe in their heyday.
Keep on moving, try to find better weather. I keep on learning, hoping I'll feel clever. I keep on hiding, scared I might get seen.
The only song in there that's not Hokey Joint is, and it's very deliberately not Hokey Joint because it takes place the morning after he's angrily thrown the ashes away, so Rafe's gone. So I didn't want to have a song by the fictional band in there, and the obvious choice was a song by Hey Negrita. And I was actually myself recording in the studio with Felix, who's the lead singer and manager of Hey Negrita. I was recording in the studio with him pretty much when my brother passed away, so it has a resonance to me on a personal level as well, and I just think it's a very emotive song, and it changed the tone very importantly there. So yeah, I'm very grateful to Felix as well for that track. It's time for me to come out of the closet, so to speak, and fess up to being Husky Jack. Whose name you'll see credited with some of the score, along with Christopher Barnett, who's actually a proper composer. I'm just a guitar player, but I, along with the help of Chris, did the bulk of the rest of the score. I also drafted in Captain Bliss, who's a very good friend of mine, harmonica player, and we've played together many times.
Sorry, we all gotta die. So long and see you soon. Don't waste time, it don't take long. I'll see you when I die. 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 I'll see you when I die.
James Fisher playing Jonah. James, I've worked with James many times. We've been friends now for not since time began, but certainly 6-7 years, something like that. I think the biggest factor of casting him in this was kind of to make it personally easy as well. The nature of the story and my relationships to the story meant that I wanted someone that I knew and trusted to take on this lead role, who I knew that I could tell personal things from my own experience without it feeling weird. I just thought it was time that James stepped up and actually played a proper lead role, and as lead roles go, this is about as lead as you can get, because he's pretty much in every scene all the time, often on his own.
I don't think the pressure's any greater. I mean, I certainly didn't think of me being in every frame when I'm filming, when we're shooting. It's just about taking every scene apart and just making sure that you prepare just unbelievably well.
And I think people just maybe wouldn't immediately think of him for a role like this, which involves a lot of emotion. It's a tough job. It's not just crying and screaming. There's some irrational craziness going on, but a lot of crying, a lot of vulnerability, and also a lot of time where he's on his own. He's talking to someone that's not even there.
Absolutely, the most difficult thing that I've actually had to do. I kept thinking, I wonder if this is kind of like how it is, working with green screen CGI characters, or Gollum and that sort of thing. But it was again just about preparing as well as possible and having a bit of inner dialogue for that other character. Hopefully it's worked out. I think it looks great.
I would like, could you do slightly variation from the menu? Bacon.
It's not on the menu, you're having it.
I don't believe you. Come on then. Could you try bacon and sausage in a bat.
Why do you sound
Good morning. Wonderful today.
She wants to exterminate you.
Cheers.
You are calling before.
Anyone of that age, I think, would be incredibly fortunate if they hadn't had some kind of grief or sadness. I've had my own. Fortunately, not that great, but obviously, again, I know people who have. For me, it's a combination of things. It's a little bit of personal experience, and it's a lot of imagination, drawing on some bad places that, like I say, I could never even say out loud. But with the crying, it was kind of a pre-planned thing that I didn't want to physically let the tears flow too often, because it would just be the same thing over and over. Like you say, there's a lot of crying in the film. I didn't want it to just be a weep fest. So I think I wanted to make sure that that final release at the end, when Rafe is back and he's finally got that closure, that's when the tears really flowed. But before then, obviously, I just get tearful, and maybe one or two little tears and stuff like that. But yeah, that was kind of the release at the end.
We are friend Johnny in the left third, and James will be out. And you just walk and sit into this. Simple as that. Johnny, I've worked with Johnny many times, several times certainly. He was also a producer on the film, so he was almost bound to have some role, however small, in this film. And of all the actors I know, Johnny looks most like a smackhead. So there's a number of cameos from some actors that you might recognise from small screen or big screen. We've got Will Johnson from Waking the Dead, Jill Greenacre, who was in the British Empire years ago. I remember when I was much younger watching that. John Campling, who's had a couple of appearances in Harry Potter of all things. Find him if you can. And in fact, those three and Francis, who plays Neve, all came through James from a film that he did called Hard Shoulder. So we actually kind of stole the cast of that film almost piecemeal.
She was actually my first choice, or one of my first suggestions to Drew. I think we had a conversation, and she was actually out of the country, so we kind of moved on. But it just so happened that the situation changed, and so did the dates. So at very late notice, I actually give her a call on that, and she was available, which we was extremely pleased about.
There's another couple of casts in there. There's Lucy Terberg, who's quite new to the scene, who auditioned for the part of Stephanie at the beginning of the film and did a great job. And Roxy, whose cameo was even briefer, but again, I think she did a great job. She was a trooper.
Yeah. Hold those tassels tight so they block your line. Yeah, that's it. And now rock out with your tassels.
Think about
To a large extent, Jonah is based on me, in the sense that he's lost his brother. I play guitar, he plays guitar. The similarities kind of stop there on a deeply biographical level.
You shouldn't really prepare a lot differently than you would for another film. Your research and whatever you do beforehand should be strong for any role now. But I think when you have the lead, you can't help but just work that a little bit harder, perhaps.
I've tried to put in some of my emotional experiences subsequent to losing my brother in the story, but yeah, he's kind of his own character as well, because there's a limit to how much you want to just see yourself parading around on screen in someone else's performance.
You know, Jonah's of a certain age, but you know, I think like a lot of lads will probably have some history or memories of how they were as teenagers and, you know, their 20s, in their bachelor days, you know, as I did, and that. So, you know, there's a lot to draw on, you know, not only from personal experience and that, but, you know, you obviously everyone's got a few friends that you know, like to play around a little bit.
The other characters in the film are mostly archetypal characters. Obviously, you're watching this now, having hopefully watched the film, so I can spoil it. When you get to the end, you realise that essentially this is an imagined journey anyway. It's something that Jonah has gone through while sort of preparing to go and deliver the eulogy for his brother. So a lot of the characters are kind of very much sort of archetypal, almost fairy tale characters. Will plays the lawyer who sort of sends them on his quest, and you've got the old lady, you know, fortune teller, who sort of gives them some assistance and helps them make sense of things. And Chloe's character Alice at the end is again the kind of, you know, is she a ghost as well? Is she spirit? What is she's kind of offering guidance? They're kind of helping him along the way. Do you just want to position it, or I'll just run through it well?
I think she looked the best.
Well, we could just get that and a handful of the bits and drop it into a close frame.
There's actually enough of
Just
it
to try and...
to shoot from one angle.
The story of the urn. Now, initially in the script, Jonah is very practically minded, and he thinks to himself, the lid's a bit loose on this urn. Probably not the best thing to take on the road. So he diligently, you know, transfers the ash from the urn into a Tupperware pot. You know, a nice sort of sealed box, and away he goes. And you can see the beginning of that story in the film as is. He's looking around for it. He's measuring up which pot is going to be best. And then he knocks the urn off.
It's not very often as a DP you get a chance to majorly influence the script and its development. But on this occasion, I played a stroke of genius.
Now, in the script, that didn't happen. Glenn decided to add that when he turned around in the kitchen and knocked the urn off the table, off the counter with his elbow, and it smashed to pieces on the floor.
So I was in the kitchen setting up the next shot, which involves moving the urn. You know, the camera's set, and all the time you're looking back through the camera and moving the urn, and I pushed it a little too far and it lost the balance and it spilt over the edge.
Fortunately, the situation was salvageable. We were able to kind of reconstruct the urn just enough for to see it fall as kind of a whole piece, and then again get a shot of those pieces hitting the ground.
I can't remember what blue and profane language I used, but it was very, very foul. At which point Drew believed that his camera had taken a tumble, and so there's mixed emotions for Drew, because he came into the kitchen expecting to find his camera in pieces on the kitchen floor, but alas, it was only the urn.
So yeah, the story changed dramatically, and at the time I thought, oh god, this is terrible, because it's kind of funny in a dark way, and I didn't, you know, humour was something I was almost trying to avoid. And then I thought, you know, why not? Why shouldn't it be a little bit dark humour in there? It is what it is. And in some ways, it's a better way of getting the ashes into a Tupperware pot anyway. The road trip, which we fondly call it, was 5 days. Pretty much doing a circuit, going up from London to the Lake District and then across to the Dales and Moors to Whitby, and then the journey back. It was 5 days, and there were 6 of us, I think, in 2 cars, and it was a one-shot deal. We had X amount to do, and we had to do it because we weren't going to be able to afford to go on this trip again, go and do pickups in the Lake District or Yorkshire, we kind of had to get those pages done.
The road trip was like a week off for me, doing something you love and fulfilling yourself in a very creative manner.
Filmmakers we may be, experts on camping we are not. We seemed, as a group, largely unable to put up tents, except apart from Chloe, who was, for some reason, a genius at tent erecting. So yeah, we turn up at the Lake District. We kind of get these tents up with the help of Chloe, and then we decide not to sleep in them.
I wanted to get involved and and stuck in. It sounded fun.
Chloe, who fortunately doesn't exist, because if she did, she would just be a freak of nature. Decided, even though we only needed her for Friday in Whitby, of the 5 days on the road trip, decided that she would rather than meet us in Whitby on Friday morning, she would come for 5 days on the road with 5 guys camping.
Yeah, it was fun, but quite tiring at times, and very cold and wet, and not the most comfy. Not the most comfy trip. Yeah, sleeping in toilets, and that wasn't so fun.
I say she's a freak of nature. She's wonderful. She's got this unflappable spirit. She's clearly mad, but she came along. There's not many actors or actresses that would do this. She came along and she mucked in. She carried stuff. She put up tents. She never wanted to be idle. She was always doing something, always helping. Holding an umbrella or a boom or whatever it was. She was always doing stuff. And providing insane entertainment for the rest of us. We are currently in very close to Grasmere in the Lake District, where we are on location with the first official feature film from Monkeys Inc. Films, Black Smoke Rising.
Award-winning Monkeys Inc. films.
Award-winning, fresh off the back of Rain Dance. We're here in the pissing rain, soaked, miserable, and nearly had a disastrous
Wet
day.
feet.
But we do have a spanking, wonderful, secure production office, which we'd like to show you. And here it is. There's the toilets, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 5 showers. And here's the office.
Here's the showers. This one spits.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
This is my office.
And so this is where we hang out and relax.
This is where the magic happens.
And where we're going to probably sleep tonight.
The actors, the talent among us, and me, because I guess we're pussies, couldn't be asked, so we just slept in the toilets, which are nice and dry, nice and warm, but the motion sensor lighting was quite amusing, because every time anyone would move, they would flick on, off and on.
Even if we hadn't been filming, it would have been an adventure, I think, because we foolishly, and we should know better, foolishly on the first night, because we were celebrating having just won an award for another film the previous, or a couple of nights before that, we celebrated a little bit, and some of us got a little inebriated.
Some Trappist monkey beer was drunk, some red wine was drunk, some Jack Daniels was drunk, some more Jack Daniels was drunk, even more Jack Daniels was drunk. We kind of ruthlessly took the piss out of James Fisher, and he went to bed early, and then Chloe went to bed, and then Paul went to bed, and Glenn went to bed, and I think it's left with Drew and I talking about being naked on film sets, and this sort of sparked an idea in my head, and he went to bed, and I decided that despite the fact it was 4 o'clock in the morning, October, in the Lake District with gale force winds and torrential rain, that it was my opportunity to go walking in the woods naked, and I fell down a ravine into a mountain stream, and yeah, one of my happiest days on films.
As a group, we are brutal to each other in terms of banter and taking the piss, etc. which is half the fun. It makes everything kind of fun, and we're all mature enough, I think, to largely take it. But there were points pretty much for most people, I think, on those 5 days when we were on the road, where breaking point was tested.
I was like heavy in character and trying to just keep focused. You know, Jonah, if you've seen the film, is not bouncing around and very happy for a lot of the time, and that. So it was kind of important for me to stay focused a little bit. So it was hard. It was hard for me to sort of let go as I would have liked to have done.
What's your job on the film?
Oh, lots of things.
Name 2.
I'm the laughter of the film. I laugh a lot. Keep everyone smiling.
I don't know if it was a rough night or what it was, but the next morning when we were packing up, and Glenn and I think, were being professional and for once, and actually going around getting some nice sort of establishing shots of the morning mist over the hills, the Lake District, and beautiful shots. Next thing we know, we hear Manson and Hamer screaming at the top of their lungs at each other.
You're talking about the time that everyone thinks that I punched Paul Hamer.
Yeah.
I didn't punch Paul Hamer at all.
Their voices reverberating around the Lake District.
I think there's a moment when I said, pull your bloody weight, and he said, I am, why don't you pull your weight? And we ended up shouting at each other in this car park at about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Punctuated finally by this enormous slapping sound as someone clearly smacked someone else.
We can have this 5-minute blowout, shout at each other and then go, really love you, man. And we did this and said, come on, let's get on with it. We did this sort of colossal high five and had a hug. And it was a really good high five. It's like a real sort of loud one.
Yeah, Nerves got a little frayed, but maybe they'll have more accurate. They maintain that nothing happened.
And of course, the whole of the rest of the crew thinks that I punched Paul. And it doesn't matter how many times we say, no, we were high-fiving. They go, no, you bitch slapped him.
Now, I've heard the sound a high five makes, and I've heard the sound a good old slap to the cheek makes, and I'll warrant that someone got a little bit physical. But who knows?
How far have we got to drive?
It's about 200 miles. A couple of months probably. Going from Grasmere in the Lake District, Cumbria, across Yorkshire, Dales, the Moors or whatever, all the way to sunny Whitby.
When we'd finished in the Lake District, after it had been raining incessantly, you start to think, oh, finally, now we can go across the moors, get out of this place, and maybe the sun will shine. But it didn't. It just got worse and worse and worse.
My shoes got absolutely soaking. And there are several of my socks strewn across the Yorkshire Dales, I think, that just got beyond drying. Socks that just were never going to be used again. So I think they ended up in ditches and stuck on barbed wire fences and whatever.
What happened to your shoes?
What happened to my fucking shoes?
Yeah.
Well, they're currently in the footwell of my car. Because popped into the Yorkshire Dales of an afternoon, right now, car coming. Popped into the Yorkshire Dales of an afternoon and stumbled into a wet dyke, of all things. And, yes, dampness turned to soddenness, and I thought, bugger trenchfoot, I'm just going to take my socks off. The socks now adorn a fence somewhere in the Dales, and...
You chucked your socks?
chuck the socks.
How many pairs of socks have you chucked now?
That's the third pair gone. I just love saying that. I was up to my knees in a wet dike.
So if you had smell-o-vision, you'd be a little bit further away. These are slimy. Come on, let's get rid of them. First casualties of black smoke rising. Well, apart from the 3 pairs of socks that are on there. Fuck you. Fuck you, let's go. Back on the road.
£6 those replacement shoes cost me, and they didn't last much beyond the end of that shoe. But they were very welcome.
You know, basically because the North Yorkshire moors were flooded, so we had lots of detours and lots of other problems that we had to contend with. So on one of the days we had a 12 and 3/8 page day to complete. And for anybody who's never shot a movie, which I'm assuming that people watching making of documentaries probably haven't, 12 and 3/8 page days are not something you want to do ever.
The wonderful thing about that was the day after we'd stayed in a hotel. You know, you felt reborn again after that. So yes, I got up with zest that morning. Good night's sleep in a bed.
We knew that the next morning was going to be the beginning of a very long day because we were up at 5 a.m. I think, to rush to Whitby Beach to get the early morning light, and we weren't working consistently every hour, every minute that God sent, but we were there, as I say, we were up at 5 and we were shooting until I think midnight that night, off and on, gaps here and there in between, just because the scheduling became a problem a little bit and we had to do a variety of things that on a normal film set I would probably have been shot for asking people to do, you know. But, you know, everyone had fish and chips and the breaks, and I think everyone enjoyed it.
You know, that culminated on the beach, right at the end, and you know, I'm diving around in the sea at, I don't know what the time was, probably about 1 a.m. by that point. It's freezing cold. God knows what the temperature was, but by that point, I think we'd gone way past tired, which again was fantastic for me, and that, because, you know, at that point I was, you know, the character was completely losing it, and everyone rolled up their trousers and just dived into the sea with me, literally. Not that it was any good rolling up your trousers, because, you know, the waves were crashing in. It was a rough night and everyone got soaking wet, so we all sort of just like trotted back, you know, to the cars, just completely covered in sand and wet and cold, and yeah, it was good camaraderie.
Oh, I ain't ever coming home. I ain't fishing on my own.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, distinguished guests, members of the Nobel Academy. That's a wrap. Thank you all very much.